Real stories of werewolves, of dogman history, from your emails, illustrated and animated with the democratizing magic of machine learning AI. Welcome to Scary Stories.
Dogman made my brother soil himself. Dear Scary Stories NYC. When I was younger, I was never into cryptids, but my brother was a big fan of all of them. That's why it felt weird to me when I saw a cryptid, in this case a dogman, before my brother did. And it was even weirder that he didn't seem to believe me when I told him. Well, he believes me now, and I'm going to tell you the story of why. I never expected to see something that would change the way I looked at the woods around our house. Those trees had been my playground since I was little, the trails as familiar to me as the hallways of my home. But after that night, after what I saw, the woods were never the same. It was late in the evening, just around dusk, when I decided to take one last walk before heading inside. The night was cool, the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything feel sharper. Leaves crunched under my boots as I followed the narrow dirt path behind our backyard, winding deeper into the trees. I wasn't afraid of those woods. Not then. I thought I knew them too well. I had just passed the old half-rotten log we used as a marker for how far we were allowed to go when something shifted in the underbrush up ahead. At first I thought it was a deer, or maybe even a bear. I stopped walking, holding my breath. The woods were still. They were too still. The usual chirp of crickets, the rustling of squirrels, it was all gone. And then it stepped out. At first my brain struggled to make sense of what I was seeing. It was big, taller than any person I'd ever met. Maybe 8 feet, maybe more. Its body was covered in dark, almost black fur, but its shape was all wrong for a bear. It stood on 2 legs, its arms long and muscular, ending in hands. Yes, hands, with long fingers tipped in claws. But it was the head that made my stomach drop. It was a canine, like a wolf, but not quite. The snout was broader, the ears taller and more pointed. Its eyes reflected the fading light, glowing in eerie amber color as they looked onto mine. I couldn't move. It didn't growl. It didn't charge. It just watched me, its chest rising and falling with slow, steady breaths. I wanted to run, to turn and bolt for home, but some deep, instinctual part of me knew movement of any sort would likely be a mistake. I don't know how long we stood like that. It might have been seconds or minutes. And then, just as smoothly as it had appeared, it took a step back. Another. And then, without a sound, it melted into the trees and it was gone. Only then did my body obey me. I spun and I ran, heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. I didn't stop running until I was inside, slamming the door shut behind me and locking it for the first time in years. I didn't sleep much that night. Every shadow outside my window looked taller. Every creak of the house made my breath catch. But one thing was certain. I had seen something that isn't supposed to exist, and I really wanted to tell someone. I chose my brother Jake, not because I was sure he believed me, but because I thought he would want to. He was the kind of kid who spent hours watching videos about Bigfoot, UFOs, and whatever else people whispered about in the dark. If anyone would at least hear me out, I thought it would be him. I went into his room that morning before school. He was lying on his bed scrolling through his phone, feet up on the wall. I took a deep breath. I saw something in the woods last night. He barely glanced at me. Cool, was it a squirrel? I sighed. No, it was big. It was like really big. That got his attention. He put his phone down and sat up. Well, how big was it? I hesitated, knowing this was the moment I could back out. But I didn't. 7 feet, 8 feet, maybe more. His eyes widened slightly, and I saw the curiosity spark in them. Like a bear, you think? No, I said, it walked on 2 legs. Now he was fully focused. What did it look like? I swallowed. Well, it looked like a wolf. But, on two legs and wrong. Jake stared at me for a moment, and then he broke into a grin. No way, you're messing with me. I am not, I said, frustrated. I swear I saw it. It was right in front of me. It looked at me. It knew I was there. He considered this, tilting his head. Are you serious? I'm dead serious. Jake sat back against the wall, thinking. All right, say I believe you. You do believe me. He ignored me. Say I believe you. What do you want me to do about it? Well, nothing, I admitted. I just had to tell someone. Jake nodded slowly. Then he smirked. You do know that if I tell anyone your story, they're gonna think you're crazy, right? I felt a twinge of worry. You won't tell, right? He grinned wider. Oh, I definitely won't tell. I should have known better than to trust him. I knew something was wrong the moment I stepped out of my first class the next morning. It started with whispers, quick glances, heads turning just a little too fast when I walked by. Then the snickers, the muffled laughs behind hands. By the time I'd made it to my locker, I'd already caught bits and pieces of what they were saying. Did you hear? She thinks she saw Bigfoot. No, not Bigfoot. She says it was a werewolf. I bet she got scared of a deer and freaked out. And then, the worst part. Jake, standing in the middle of a group of his friends, grinning ear to ear. He saw me, and before I could say anything, he clapped a hand to his chest in mock fear. Oh no, he said dramatically. It's Dog Girl. The whole group burst into laughter. I felt my face heat up. Jake, you promised. I didn't promise. I never said I wouldn't tell anyone. I never said I wouldn't tell everyone. I wanted to disappear. It didn't stop all day. People made fake howling noises when I walked by. Someone taped a crudely drawn picture of a werewolf to my locker. In class, a kid leaned over and whispered, "Did you check under your bed? Dogman might be waiting for you." By the time the final bell rung, I was done. Jake was going to have to pay for this. Normally, Jake and I walked home together, but after the day I had no plans to be anywhere near him. I stormed ahead, taking the long route, while he and a couple of his friends decided to cut through the woods. That was the faster route, one we'd used plenty of times before, but that day, I hoped they got lost. Except as I trudged along heading home, I started thinking. I wanted Jake to see what I had seen. I wanted him to be the one standing frozen in place, hard hammering, when it stepped out of the trees. So at the last second, I veered off the road and I slipped into the woods, trailing them from a distance. They were about 20 yards ahead, their voices easy to follow. They were still laughing. They were still making fun of me. And then, everything went silent. I stopped walking. So did they. A twig snapped. Not from us, from somewhere ahead. And then, it stepped onto the path. At first, nobody moved. The thing that emerged from the trees wasn't some shadow in the distance. It was right there, right in front of the boys, standing in the middle of the narrow dirt path. It was just as I had remembered it. 7 feet tall, 8 feet tall, maybe taller, covered in thick, dark fur. Its body was built like something that had spent its entire life hunting, moving, and watching. Jake and his friends hadn't seen it before. They didn't know how it moved, how it just appeared without a sound. But I did, and now I wasn't the only one anymore. One of Jake's friends let out a shaky breath. That tiny sound, barely a whisper, was enough to change everything. The dogman's ears flickered toward the boys. Then its head turned, those burning amber eyes locking onto them with chilling intelligence. Jake was frozen. His arms were stiff at his sides, his fingers curled tight, his breath hitched, and then the smell hit first. It was unmistakable, sharp, sour, immediate. Jake's knees trembled, his face twisted. He had lost control of his bowels. Right there. Right in front of the Dogman. I might have laughed if I wasn't so terrified. The Dogman sniffed the air, tilting its head slightly, as if considering us. It took one slow step forward. Its claws sank into the dirt. Jake made a noise, something between a gasp and a whimper. His friend grabbed his arm, ready to run, but no one dared move yet. Then, as smoothly as it had appeared, the Dogman stepped backward. It never took its eyes off the boys. One step, then another, and then, with an eerie kind of grace, it just melted into the trees, and it was gone. For a moment, no one spoke. I don't think they even breathed. And then, Jake said, "We need to go." Nobody argued. Everybody ran. Branches slapped at my arms as we tore through those woods, not caring about the path, just needing to get away. Jake's friends were fast, but not as fast as my fear. When we finally burst onto the main road, panting, covered in leaves and sweat, Jake doubled over, hands on his knees. He was still shaking. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at anyone. We all knew what had happened. And that next day at school, so would everyone else. I saw Dogman. Body, a Sasquatch. Dear Scary Stories, NYC. I used to be friends with a Dogman. He was the kind with the long, beautiful tail and a wolf-like head. He usually stood on his hind legs, at least when I was around. And he kept the other predators away from my part of the Wisconsin woods. One time I even saw him frighten off a Bigfoot or ape man, and I'll tell you about it in a minute. But first I want to tell you about the first time I ran into that Dogman. I remember that day with a clarity that surprises even me, how the moss felt soft beneath my back, how the distant chirping of sparrows blended with the whisper of the summer wind. I was exhausted from a morning of berry picking, and it pulled me into an unexpected nap, my worn canvas bag still slung over my shoulder. I'm not sure how long I slept under that tree, but when I woke up, it was dark out, and it was getting chilly. Shivering as much from the cool air as from my fear of the dark, I collected my things and dusted myself off, and then I began to walk home through the dark forest. When I first became aware of movement, it was more of a shift in the air than any sound. Something was different. The forest had gone quiet, that peculiar silence that speaks of an unexpected presence. My head turned slowly, not with alarm, but with a strange sense of anticipation. There he was, not 10 feet away, tall, impossibly tall for something that seemed to move with such grace. Long-tailed, unlike anything I'd ever seen before. Part dog, part something entirely otherworldly. His fur was a mixture of brown and ash, catching the moonlight in a way that made him seem almost, well, supernatural. We looked at each other, not as predator and prey, but as two beings who had accidentally interrupted each other's solitude. His eyes, deep, intelligent, with a complexity I'd never seen in any animal, held no threat. Just curiosity. Just recognition. I didn't move. He didn't move either. A moment stretched between us, fragile as a spider's web, holding something I couldn't yet understand. Something that would, in the years to come, become a connection more profound than I could have ever imagined. And then, as quickly as he appeared, he moved back into the trees, leaving me wondering whether what I'd seen was real or some strange woodland dream. Some connections transcend ordinary understanding. Mine began 24 years ago in these Wisconsin woods, with a creature that existed somewhere between myth and reality, a long-tailed being who became more familiar to me than most human acquaintances. I continued to see the creature for years after that, sometimes only from a great distance, but Other times we would acknowledge each other's presence. When I had food with me, I would leave him some as an offering of friendship. I didn't stick around to see if he ate it, but I always made sure he could see me leaving it for him. I started to expect to see him, and I started to sort of think of him as my friend as well. I know that probably sounds strange, but he was at least a pleasant stranger. I looked forward to seeing him. And so on that late summer morning, the morning of the Sasquatch, my heart leaped as I saw him immediately. Not with surprise, but with the kind of recognition that comes from decades of shared landscape. My woodland companion stood at the clearing's edge, a silhouette that was simultaneously strange and utterly familiar. His form was unlike anything in conventional wildlife guides. He was too tall to be a wolf. He was too graceful to be simply animal. 20 years. Let that sink in. Not occasional encounters, but a sustained, inexplicable connection that had woven itself into the very fabric of my existence. Most people would call it impossible. I knew it was simply true. So seeing him there, my steps quickened, filled with a spontaneous joy that surprised even me. After all those years, the sight of him still produced a sense of wonder. Not fear, not uncertainty, but a profound, inexplicable happiness that bubbled up from somewhere deep inside me. I wanted to call out, to announce my presence, but we'd never communicated that way. Our connection existed in subtle movements, in shared moments of quiet observation. Words would have felt like an intrusion. Closer now I could see more details. The silvered fur that caught morning light in unexpected ways. The distinctive long tail that had first caught my attention decades ago. The muscular frame that suggested strength beyond ordinary understanding. But something was different. His usual constant movement was gone, replaced by an absolute unnatural stillness that freaked me the hell out. In spite of his stillness, he seemed very agitated as well. In all our years of encounters, I had never seen him like this. Not once. His tail, that beautiful expressive appendage that always seemed to communicate more than any sound could, while it hung absolutely motionless. No gentle sway, no subtle twitch that typically signaled awareness or curiosity. Just complete, unbroken stillness. The woodland around us had gone silent. No chickadee calls, no woodpecker rhythms, no rustling leaves. My friend, and yes, after all these years that's precisely what I thought of him as, remained facing away. Not ignoring me precisely, but focused on something that existed entirely beyond my immediate perception. Something that was coming. Something that had transformed my familiar woodland companion from a creature of living grace into a frozen statue of pure concentrated alertness. Every muscle seemed coiled, ready, not in fear, but in preparation. In that moment, I understood something profound about wilderness, about connections that exist beyond human comprehension, about relationships that cannot be explained, only experienced. My heart raced, not with fear, but with an anticipation that felt electric and transformative. Whatever was about to happen was going to change everything. My long-tailed friend, this creature I had known for decades, was no longer the familiar presence I recognized. Every muscle of his body spoke of ancient, primordial tension. A black-furred ape-like creature emerged from the tree line like a nightmare given flesh. Not a bear, not any known predator. Something else entirely. Something I would call a Sasquatch. Standing nearly 9 feet tall, its body was a grotesque combination of muscle and raw, unchecked power. Thick black fur covered a humanoid frame, but it was the face that captured my absolute attention. A face that defied nature itself. Long fangs protruded from its mouth, yellowed and sharp, extending past its lower jaw in a way that suggested something prehistoric. Not the neat, functional teeth of a wolf or a bear, but something more savage, more ancient. Teeth designed for rending and tearing. Teeth designed for pure destruction. Its eyes held a manic quality, not the calculated predatory focus of a hunter, but something more terrifying, a wild, uncontrolled rage that seemed to consume everything around it. Those eyes didn't just look, they burned, with an intensity that suggested intelligence without compassion, power without restraint. My dogman friend stood his ground. Where the Bigfoot was raw, uncontrolled power, my companion embodied something different. Controlled strength, deliberate movement, every muscle coiled with the precision that spoke of intelligence, far beyond simple animal instinct. His silvered fur caught the forest light differently, almost luminescent, with an otherworldly and supernatural quality that suggested he existed between worlds. His long tail now served as a counterbalance, moving with calculated purpose. The Bigfoot moved first, a thunderous charge that would have terrified any ordinary creature. But my friend didn't retreat. He just shifted, a movement so quick it was almost invisible, redirecting the massive creature's momentum. Raw power met calculated precision. The black-furred monster crashed through the underbrush, momentarily confused by the unexpected response. My companion moved like liquid mercury, always just slightly beyond reach, always in control. Guttural sounds erupted from the Bigfoot. Not quite roars, not quite screams. Something even more primal, a language of pure unfiltered rage that seemed to make the very forest tremble. My friend responded with something equally ancient, a sound that wasn't a growl, that wasn't a bark, a sound that existed between communication and pure focused intention, a warning that transcended species. The confrontation became a dance, the Bigfoot's savage power against my companion's controlled strength. Each movement calculated, each moment pregnant with potential violence. But there was never any real doubt about the outcome. Not to me, with a series of movements too quick to fully comprehend. My long-tailed friend began actively driving the monster back. Not attacking, herding, controlling, pushing the massive creature away from whatever territory he considered his turf, whatever territory he considered sacred. The Bigfoot's rage transformed from pure aggression to something closer to confusion, and then fear. My companion was relentless, each movement precise, each action designed to communicate a clear message. This space is protected. This boundary will not be crossed. Slowly, methodically, he pushed the monster back, through dense underbrush, around ancient tree trunks, away from the heart of the woodland. And then, as suddenly as it began, the confrontation ended. The forest resumed its breath. Birds tentatively returned to their songs. Leaves rustled back into their ordinary dance. I stood witness to something beyond explanation, beyond understanding. A connection that defied every conventional boundary of nature, of friendship, of what we believe is possible. Our encounters were about trying to bridge impossible species barriers. They were something subtle. They were something profound. There was a mutual recognition of something fundamental. Wilderness has its own language, its own rules of engagement, and some connections transcend what we understand as being possible. I don't know if any of this is interesting to anybody but myself. If you'd like to hear more, I do have years of stories. If you don't, I understand. It's probably better for me to keep all this to myself anyway. After all, it does tend to draw strange attention once people start to realize that you've been friends with a real life dogman.
Would it be so very wrong if we were to take a sec to thank dear old Sean? Please join me in thanking one of our longest and most cherished PayPal channel members, Sean Saunders, for making this episode possible. Sean is a member of our PayPal club at peterbernard.com. That means he gets to see the brand new Secret Uncensored episodes we're dropping this weekend.
A cryptid confrontation. Dear Scary Stories NYC. I never believed in monsters. Not really. Sure, I indulged in the occasional horror documentary, the grainy trail cam footage that circulated online, the late-night campfire tales meant to spook first-time campers. I enjoyed all of that. But did I believe any of it? No. At least, not until that night. I was crouched low behind a fallen tree, my breath locked in my chest, my hands gripping the damp bark like it was the only thing anchoring me to reality. The moon filtered through the canopy above, silver light casting long shadows over the forest floor. And in the clearing ahead, maybe 20-30 yards away, stood two creatures that shouldn't exist. One was massive, taller than any man, coated in thick, dark fur that bristled under the dim glow of the moon. It stood on two legs, its shoulders impossibly broad, its posture hunched forward in something between aggression and calculation. Its eyes, deep set beneath a heavy brow, burned with a dark intensity. It goes by many names, but I'd call it Bigfoot. The other, a nightmare pulled from the depths of ancient folklore. Lankier but no less intimidating, its frame was twisted with lean muscle, ears pointed like a wolf's, jaws filled with fangs too large for its mouth. It exuded something primal, something violent. A long tail twitched behind it, agitation rippling through its stance. That's what I'd call Dogman. I should have run. I should have done anything but stay frozen, my heartbeat hammering like an offbeat drum against my ribs. The Dogman was the first to move. With a growl so deep it vibrated through the trees, the creature lunged forward, clawed hands wrapping around the trunk of a massive fallen log. I watched, barely comprehending, as it lifted the thing as if it weighed nothing, easily the thickness of a telephone pole, and 10 or 20 feet long, damp with age, brittle with decay. And then, with a snarl, the creature swung. The force of the impact was deafening. Bark splintered, wood cracked like a gunshot through the silent night. Bigfoot reeled but did not fall. Instead, it let loose a guttural roar that turned my blood cold, leaving me shivering. I wanted to move. I wanted to run. To grab my phone to wake my wife. I wanted to do something, but my body wouldn't listen. I had just walked into the middle of something ancient and primal, and I didn't feel as though I were supposed to be there. You know, this trip was supposed to be a reset, a break from the constant hum of technology, from the emails and notifications, and the endless demands of everyday life. Just me, my wife, and the vast stretch of the Nicollet National Forest, tucked away from civilization with nothing but our tent, a fire pit, and a cooler stocked with enough food and beer to last the weekend. The drive had been peaceful enough, long stretches of winding back roads, the kind where the trees seemed to fold in around you, swallowing the world outside. My wife Jess had been skeptical about the whole idea from the start. Not that she hated the outdoors, but she was more of a cabin rental type than a sleeping on the ground in a nylon sack type. "You're sure this is a safe thing to do?" she asked as we pulled onto the gravel road leading to our chosen campsite. She had her arms crossed, eyes scanning the dense tree line like something might leap out at us any second. I grinned, throwing the truck into park. "Well, it's safer than driving through Chicago traffic. Worst thing we're likely to run into is a nosy raccoon." She didn't look convinced, but she sighed in resignation, hopping out of the truck. "Okay, fine, but if I hear one weird noise in the middle of the night, I'm sleeping in the truck." With that, we got to work setting up camp. I handled the tent while Jess unrolled our sleeping bags and arranged our gear. The late afternoon sun filtered through the trees, casting golden light over everything, and for a while it felt perfect. Just the rhythmic sounds of nature, the distant chatter of birds, the occasional rustle of wind through the leaves. And then, as I was hammering in the last stake, a sound cut through the stillness. A snap somewhere deep in the woods. Loud. Most likely deliberate. I paused, gripping the mallet a little tighter. Jess straightened from where she was organizing our small cooking area. "Did you hear that?" I forced a chuckle, brushing off the slight unease that crept up my spine. It was probably just a deer, I told her. She frowned. That sounded even bigger than a deer. I turned back to the tent, pretending I wasn't listening for another sound. "You know, bears aren't common around here," I said, "and even if there was one, it'd probably steer clear of us. We're making too much noise." Jess didn't look satisfied, but she let it go. Still, I noticed how she kept glancing toward the tree line as we finished setting up. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across our little clearing, we had a fire going and dinner sizzling in a cast iron pan. The air smelled of seasoned meat and wood smoke, mixing with the cool bite of the evening breeze. Jess had finally started to relax, curled up in a camp chair with a book while I poked at the fire. "This isn't so bad, right?" I said. She exhaled, setting her book down. "Okay, I'll admit it," she said. "It's kind of nice." I smirked and said I told you so. And then for a while we sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds. The crackle of the firewood, the distant hoot of the owl. But as the darkness thickened, the woods seemed to shift. Sounds carried differently, the winds whispering through the branches in a way that made the trees feel, I don't know, closer? At one point, Jess shivered and pulled her hoodie tighter. "It's really weird out here, isn't it?" I hadn't noticed it at first, but she was right. It had gotten quiet. The usual crickets and frogs had dulled as if something unseen lurked just beyond our sight. I tossed some more wood onto the fire, watching the embers spark upward. "It's probably just the wind. The wind changing." She gave me a look, but she didn't argue. Instead, she stretched and stood, brushing the dirt from her jeans. "All right," she said, "I'm turning in." I stayed by the fire a little longer, nursing my drink and staring into the flickering flames. That feeling from earlier hadn't left. That tiny nagging sense that we weren't entirely alone. Eventually I shook it off, doused the fire, and slipped into the tent beside Jess. If only I had listened to my feeling. The cold was what woke me up first. The temperature had dropped sharply, and even inside the tent I could feel the damp chill seeping through my sleeping bag. I shifted, trying to find a warmer position, and then another sensation made itself known. A dull pressure in my bladder. Great. I lay there for a moment, debating whether I could just maybe ignore it and go back to sleep, but the discomfort was not going away, and the last thing I wanted was to spend the next few hours tossing and turning, regretting my choices. Carefully I unzipped the sleeping bag and I sat up, mindful not to wake Jess. She was curled into herself, her breathing slow and steady. I hesitated. Waking her up just to tell her I was stepping out felt unnecessary. It was a quick trip a few feet into the woods. Probably nothing worth making a fuss over, but I still wondered if I was making the right decision. I reached for my flashlight, but I stopped short. The fire had burned down to embers, casting a weak orange glow through the mesh of the tent. Outside, the forest was cloaked in darkness, but my eyes had adjusted enough that I figured I could manage without the extra light. Less chance of waking Jess, anyway. Slipping out of the tent as quietly as I could, I took a deep breath of the crisp night air. The world felt still, save for the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze. I moved a short distance into the trees, just far enough to feel like I had privacy, while still keeping the glow of the campfire embers in sight. The ground was soft under my boots, damp with lingering evening dew. I went about my business as quickly as I could, eager to crawl back into the warm sleeping bag. Well, relatively warm. And then I heard it. A sound in the distance, low and deliberate. A deep thud against the earth, heavy enough that I almost felt it more than I heard it. This froze me. My first thought was a deer, but maybe even a bear moving through the underbrush, but this didn't sound like rustling branches or the soft crunch of hooves. This was a weight. Something solid hitting the ground. Another thud, this time closer. I swallowed hard, suddenly very aware of how exposed I was. Slowly I eased back, turning toward camp. But just as I moved, Something caught my eye through the trees, a flicker of movement in the moonlight. I wasn't alone. My breath hitched. About 30 yards away, just beyond the tree line, I saw two massive figures, and they were facing each other. At first my brain refused to process what I was looking at. Maybe they were shadows or tricks of the light, but no, those were bodies. They were covered in fur, their forms barely illuminated by slivers of moonlight cutting through the trees. The first one was impossibly tall, at least 10 feet, its hulking frame covered in thick dark fur. Its shoulders were broad, its posture slightly hunched, its long arms hanging low. Even from this distance, I could see the outline of its monkey-like face. It was Bigfoot. The second creature was different. You know what I'm saying. That was the Dogman. My heart pounded so hard I thought they might hear it. Neither creature had noticed me, not yet. Their focus was locked entirely on each other. Their postures were tense and aggressive. This wasn't just a meeting. This was a confrontation. The Dogman let out a low guttural growl, the sound reverberating through the air. And then, in a blur of movement, it lunged to the side and gripped something massive, a fallen log, half rotted but still thick enough to crush a man. It lifted the huge log like it was a baseball bat. The wood groaned in protest, dirt and insects spilling from its decayed bark. With a snarl, the Dogman swung. The impact was like a thunderclap. Wood exploded in splinters as the log connected with Bigfoot's side. The larger creature staggered, but it didn't fall. Instead, it let out a sound that made my bones vibrate, a deep guttural roar that belonged to something ancient and very powerful. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, but I was frozen, locked in place by the sheer impossibility of what I was seeing. This wasn't a blurry photograph or a fleeting shadow in the distance. This was real, and I had just stumbled into the middle of it. I had to get proof. Every instinct screamed at me to stay hidden, or to turn tail and bolt back to camp, but something deeper, some desperate need to prove what I was seeing took hold. If I ran back to Jess now, she'd never believe me. Hell, I wouldn't even believe me now without evidence. My phone. I needed my phone. Keeping as low as I could, I turned and started creeping back toward the tent. Every step felt agonizingly slow, the damp earth muffling my footsteps, but every snapping twig or rustling leaf made my pulse spike. I glanced over my shoulder. Neither of them had noticed me yet. Their focus remained locked on each other, their primal standoff escalating by the second. I took a chance and moved faster. The tent was only a few yards away now, the faint glow of dying embers still casting just enough light to guide me. My hands trembled as I reached for the zipper, teeth gritted as I pulled it open with excruciating slowness. I slipped inside, my fingers fumbling blindly for where I'd left my phone. Or was it? I shoved my sleeping bag aside, dug through the pile of clothes next to me, but nothing. My breath came short and fast. I knew I had it in here somewhere. And then, finally, my fingers closed around cold glass. Got it. I yanked it out and turned it on. The screen burst to life, the glow suddenly feeling way too bright in the suffocating darkness. My heart stuttered. Had that light just given me away? I didn't wait to find out. I crawled back outside, holding my phone tight as I hurried toward the tree line. I had to be careful. One wrong move, one misstep, and I could either scare them off, or worse, attract their attention. But just as I reached the clearing, just as I raised my phone to start recording, I stepped on a loose rock. It rolled under my foot, and before I could react, I was falling. The ground rushed up to meet me, my knee slamming into the dirt hard enough to send a shock of pain up my leg. My phone flew from my grip, tumbling end over end through the darkness. I heard it smack against something solid. I barely bit back a curse. Scrambling to my hands and knees, I frantically patted the ground, my fingers searching through the damp leaves and cold soil. The phone couldn't have gone far. I just needed to. A deafening crack snapped my attention upward. I barely had time to react before another log, just as massive as the first, came swinging through the air. The dogman moved with frightening speed, gripping the enormous hunk of wood with both clawed hands and whipping it toward the Bigfoot like it weighed nothing. The impact was brutal. The log collided with Bigfoot's side, sending an explosion of bark and debris outward. The creature staggered again, but instead of retreating, it caught the log mid-fall with one enormous hand, and it threw it back. I sucked in a breath, eyes wide. The two beasts were in an all-out war now. The Sasquatch roared, lunging forward with terrifying force, swiping with massive tree-trunk arms. The dogman ducked and rolled, snatching up yet another log. Where the hell was it finding these? And it swung wildly. The force of this sent shockwaves through the ground, rattling my bones. I had to get my phone. I had to capture this. I turned back to my frantic search, sweeping my hands through the thick underbrush. Leaves crunched beneath my palms. Twigs snapped under my weight. Come on, come on. Then my fingers brushed against something smooth. My phone. Relief flooded me as I grabbed it and brought it up to my face. The screen was dark. I tapped it. Nothing. No. I mashed the power button. Still nothing. I flipped it over, running my thumb along the edges, and then I felt it. A crack along the back casing. The impact must have damaged it. My stomach dropped, the perfect evidence gone. A growl rumbled through the air, deep and primal. I looked up just in time to see the dogman lift yet another log over its head, and I realized, with absolute certainty, I was running out of time. I had no choice. I had to wake Jess. Still gripping my useless phone, I rushed back to the tent, my heart hammering. I hesitated for half a second, knowing exactly how this was gonna go. Jess hated being woken up for anything less than an emergency. But wasn't this an emergency? I unzipped the tent with shaking hands and I whispered, Jess, wake up! She groaned and curled tighter into her sleeping bag. You need to get up, Jess, now. She cracked one eye open, barely visible in the dim glow of the embers outside. Are you serious? Yeah, just trust me, there's something out there. Well, two things out there. I need you to see this. She sat up slowly, rubbing her eyes. Is this about that weird noise earlier? Because if you woke me up over... No, Jess, listen to me. I grabbed her arm. It's Bigfoot, and I know how this sounds, but it's real. I just saw them. They're fighting. She squinted at me. Are you drunk? Jess. She groaned, finally sitting up. Okay, fine. It's Bigfoot fighting another monster. But if this is actually about a couple of deer headbutting, I'm divorcing you. I ignored her and hurriedly pulled her out of the tent. She fumbled for her jacket while I practically dragged her toward the clearing, my pulse racing. If we were fast enough, she would see it. She had to see it. We reached the spot and I pointed there, right over... But there was nothing. The clearing was empty. The trees swayed in the night breeze, their branches whispering, but the towering figures were gone. Jess sighed loudly. Unbelievable. No, they were right there. I spun around, desperate to find something, anything that proved I wasn't insane. The ground was torn up, thick footprints pressed into the mud, broken branches scattered everywhere. See, look! I pointed at a massive log lying in the dirt, shattered into pieces. They were throwing those at each other. Jess crossed her arms. You're telling me you saw Bigfoot and his friend playing baseball with trees? My mouth opened and then closed. It wasn't... Okay, that's not the point. She rubbed her temples. Babe, I'm tired. Can we do this in the morning? I ran a hand through my hair, frustration burning through me. This had happened. I knew it had. I saw and heard and felt it happening. But now, standing here in the empty clearing with nothing but broken wood and my own frantic breathing, it felt stupid. It felt impossible. Jess sighed, grabbing my hand. Come on, dear, you'll feel better after some sleep. I didn't move right away. I stood there staring into the darkness, hoping that I'd see something I could show her. But I didn't. And that might have been the worst part of all. We'd like to thank our EP Daniel Bivian. Now there's a guy who knows about Livian. Please join me in thanking Daniel Bivian for making this episode possible. As I've been sick this past half a year, we've lost a lot of support from the community, and our ad revenue has been decimated. Every person who donates or becomes a channel member literally keeps us alive for one more day, and we can't thank each of you enough. Wolfman versus Dinosaur. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I'm going to tell you the story of the first time I saw a dogman and another, possibly even stranger, cryptid. It wasn't a chance encounter. In fact, my neighbor had told me exactly where to be and when in order to see the creature. Her instructions had not included the fact that I would see an even larger beast, with the werewolf like one I had gone out in that night to witness. The digital watch on my wrist blinked 12:17 a.m. as I huddled behind the stone drinking fountain in our local Midwestern town's park, just off the woods. My breath formed small clouds in the unnaturally cold June air. The park had transformed from its daytime cheerfulness into something ancient and watchful under the chilly moonlight. That's when I heard it. A crashing sound from the eastern tree line, like something large moving without concern for stealth. My fingers tightened around my phone, ready to open my camera app if need be, although my hand trembled enough to guarantee blurry footage. He emerged, exactly as my neighbor had described. The Dogman. 7 feet tall at least, running on 2 powerful hind legs that seemed too muscular for his lean frame. His movement was all contradiction. Part wolf's lope, part human stride, covering ground with impossible speed. I caught glimpses of dense gray-brown fur, a powerful chest heaving with exertion, and eyes that reflected the moonlight with an amber glow far too intelligent for any animal. The creature paused in the center of the baseball diamond, head raised in a distinctly canine posture, nostrils flaring. Those weren't the actions of something running aimlessly. The Dogman was navigating, perhaps following some path invisible to human senses, one that cut straight through our ordinary little park. And then the ground trembled. At first I thought it might be a small earthquake, not unheard of although rare in our region, but there was a rhythm to it. Footfalls. Massive footfalls. The Dogman's ears flattened against his elongated skull, and he whirled toward the same section of trees he'd emerged from. Whatever was coming, he'd sensed it long before the ground began to shake. Suddenly, something that looked like a dinosaur burst through the tree line with surprising grace for its bulk. Smaller than movie depictions, but no less terrifying, standing perhaps 12 feet tall, with a distinctive profile every child recognizes. Tyrannosaurus Rex. His skin wasn't the dull gray-green of museum models, but a mottled pattern of earthen tones with what appeared to be primitive feather-like structures along its spine and neck. The surreal tableau froze for 3 heartbeats. The Dogman poised in the moonlight, the prehistoric hunter at the edge of the trees, and me, an accidental witness hidden in shadows, questioning my very sanity. Then came what I could only describe as their joust. The Dogman didn't flee as prey should. Instead, he circled, always keeping his front toward the dinosaur, occasionally feinting forward as if testing larger creatures' reactions. The T-Rex responded with short, controlled lunges. They kept just barely not making contact. Their movements held a practiced precision of ritual rather than the chaos of combat. 2 impossible beings engaged in some dance whose rules and purpose lay beyond human understanding. The dinosaur would advance. The Dogman would yield ground but never break his stance. Then, roles would reverse, the canine figure taking 3 bold strides forward, causing the larger beast to shuffle back, small forearms twitching. This continued for perhaps 5 or 10 minutes, though time seemed suspended in the pocket of impossible reality they'd created. I'd managed to raise my phone, although my footage would later reveal only dark shapes moving against darker backgrounds. As abruptly as it began, the strange confrontation ended. The Dogman glanced once, directly at my hiding spot, amber eyes meeting mine with an intelligence that sent ice through my veins. Then, both creatures turned and raced back toward the eastern woods. Within seconds, the park stood empty again. Only the trampled grass of the baseball diamond and my racing heart remained as evidence that anything had happened at all. 3 weeks before that, I wouldn't have believed a word of what I just described. I was a 34-year-old divorced technical writer with a modest ranch house in the Midwest and absolutely no belief in the paranormal. My life centered around deadline cycles, weekend hikes, and occasional dinners with friends who worried I was becoming too solitary since my divorce. My neighbor Mrs. A lived in the faded Victorian house next door, its garden a riot of herbs and flowers that defied suburban landscaping norms. Most neighbors considered her harmlessly eccentric, the kind of old woman who named garden statues and talked to birds. Kids whispered that she was a witch. Adults nodded politely, while avoiding lengthy conversations. I'd lived next to her for 2 years with nothing more than mailbox pleasantries between us. That changed on a warm Saturday when I was weeding my sadly neglected garden beds. "Those aren't weeds, you know," came her voice startling me as she leaned over the fence. Her silver hair was wrapped in a faded blue scarf, deep lines mapping her face like a well-loved atlas. "That's yarrow," she said. "It's excellent for fever reduction." I smiled awkwardly, holding the uprooted plants. "Sorry, Mrs. A, I'm not much of a gardener." She told me that gardening is just paying attention to what the earth wants to tell you. She gazed past me toward the distant tree line visible beyond our neighborhood. "Just like this town has stories, if you know how to listen." I wondered what she meant. "What kind of stories?" I asked her. Her eyes, remarkably clear and sharp, fixed on mine. "You're not like the others around here. You might actually believe me." She glanced around as if checking for eavesdroppers before continuing. "There's a tear in the world back in those woods, in the national park. Been there longer than this town. Things come through sometimes." I remember laughing nervously and asking her what kind of things. "Oh, the dogman most frequently," she said. "Comes through regular as clockwork just after midnight. Uses our local park as his crossing path." She pointed east. "I've been watching him for 40 years now. But lately," she frowned deeply, "lately he's been being chased." "Chased by what?" I asked, already regretting encouraging what clearly seemed like an elderly woman's delusion. "Well, something big. Something ancient. Something from deeper back in time." She tapped the fence meaningly. "If you want to see for yourself, Thursday nights are most reliable. Full moon makes it easier to spot them. Just don't let them see you." I'd nodded politely and changed the subject, mentally filing the conversation under quirky neighbor encounters. Yet over the following days, her words kept returning to me. I found myself researching local folklore, finding scattered references to Wolfman sightings dating back to early settler accounts. Just curiosity, I told myself. Purely academic interest. But when that Thursday night arrived with a full moon rising over the eastern woods, I found myself packing a small backpack, flashlight, phone, jacket, thermos of coffee, and heading toward the park, feeling equal parts ridiculous and inexplicably drawn. After all, what harm could possibly come from one night of stargazing in the local park? Either I'd seen nothing, and I'd put Mrs. A's stories to rest, or... Well, I never actually considered the or until it came crashing through the trees at 12:17 a.m. I chose a strategic location in the park behind the stone drinking fountain, offering cover while maintaining a clear view of both the baseball diamond and the eastern tree line where our town borders with the deeper woods. My phone was fully charged. My camera app was on the ready. I had a thermos full of coffee, and I brought a thin camping pad to sit on. 11:30 p.m. came and went. The park settled into that peculiar midnight stillness, where even distant traffic sounds seemed to fold into themselves. The moon hung nearly full in the sky, casting everything in silver-blue luminescence that transformed familiar playground equipment into mysterious sculptures. At 12:03 a.m., the first sign that something was different. The crickets stopped chirping simultaneously, as though someone had flipped a switch. The night birds fell silent. Even the distant highway sounds seemed to dim. The air changed too, growing suddenly inexplicably colder. My breath fogged in front of me, unusual for June in our region. I felt the hairs on my arms and neck rise, and not just from the chill. Then came a faint glow among the trees, not bright like headlights or flashlights, but a subtle shimmer, as though the air itself was becoming thin, revealing something luminous behind reality's curtain. My heart thundered against my chest as a distortion spread through the trees, a rippling, like heat waves rising from summer pavement, but vertical and concentrated. Within this warping of air, dark shapes began to move. The Dogman emerged exactly as Mrs. A had described, 7 to 8 feet of impossible biology that my mind struggled to categorize. Not a wolf, not a man, yet somehow both. He moved with primal grace on 2 powerful legs, crossing from forest to baseball diamond in strides that covered ground with unsettling speed. Under the moonlight, his fur appeared dark gray-brown, thicker around his shoulders and tapering down powerful limbs. His head was unmistakably wolf-like, elongated snout, pointed ears that swiveled independently, yet his eyes held an intelligence that no canine possesses. He ran upright like a man, but with a forward lean that suggested his spine and muscular were also designed for 4-legged movement. I had been so certain I'd feel terror if Mrs. A's stories proved true, but instead I felt something else entirely, a profound wonder mixed with bone-deep recognition, like encountering something from a dream that I had forgotten having. The Dogman paused in the diamond's center, head raised, testing the air. Those weren't random movements. He was navigating. He was following some invisible path. Time felt frozen as I watched him, this impossible being from somewhere else, using our mundane world as a temporary corridor between mysteries. I might have stayed suspended there forever in that moment of discovery, had the ground not begun to tremble. Those were footsteps, massive ones. The Dogman's reaction confirmed it. His body tensed, his head whipped around toward the same place I heard the sound coming from. Whatever it was, he had sensed it before I did. I pressed deeper into my hiding spot, suddenly aware of how exposed I was, how foolish I was to have come alone. The phone in my hand felt absurdly inadequate, like bringing a toy to a natural disaster. From the same dark rippling tear in the night came something that shattered what remained of my understanding of reality. A creature I'd only ever seen reconstructed in museums or animated from movies. The Tyrannosaurus entered our world, and for me, nothing would ever be the same again. The dinosaur emerged through the rippling distortion, with surprising grace for its huge form. Smaller than movie depictions but no less impossibly large. Standing maybe 12 feet tall with that distinctive profile, the Tyrannosaurus Rex moved with the confident precision of an apex predator. My mind scrambled for a rational explanation, but my senses reported with merciless clarity the thundering impacts as its feet connected with park soil, the earthy musk that suddenly filled the air, the way moonlight caught on scales and what appeared to be primitive feathery structures along its spine and neck. The creature's eyes were forward-facing, alert, with predatory intelligence, scanning the park with the measured assessment of a hunter. For 3 eternal heartbeats, a tableau formed. The Dogman, poised in the moonlight, prehistoric hunter at the forest edge, and me, an accidental witness, questioning my sanity while crouched behind very inadequate cover. Then came what I can only describe as their dance. Not the violent chase I was expecting, but something stranger. The Dogman circled, always keeping his front toward the dinosaur, occasionally feinting forward with surprising boldness. The Tyrannosaurus responded with controlled lunges, its massive head sweeping in precise arcs that never quite connected. The dinosaur would advance. The Dogman would yield ground but never break, the roles would reverse. Back and forth it went. I'd managed to raise my phone, though my footage was useless. My hands trembled too badly for stability, and the creatures stayed in the dark. Their movements transformed the dark baseball diamond into an arena for something ancient, perhaps some territorial display carried out countless times across whatever dimensional boundary they traversed. They maintained perfect awareness of each other's position, moving in counterbalance like partners in some primeval dance. Most striking was the restraint. The Tyrannosaurus possessed jaws that could shatter bone, yet it never struck decisively. The Dogman, with its evident speed and agility, could have probably fled, but chose engagement instead. This wasn't predator and prey alone, but something more complex. Rivals, maybe, or entities bound by rules beyond my comprehension. The air between them seemed charged, distorting slightly as they moved, as though reality itself strained to accommodate their impossible presence. Occasionally glimpses of that same rippling effect from the forest edge would flash between them when they drew closest. 5 minutes of this strange confrontation passed, though time seemed suspended in the pocket of impossibility they had created. Then, something changed. A shift in the air pressure, maybe, or some signal I couldn't perceive. The Dogman glanced once, directly at me. Recognition flashed in that gaze, acknowledgement of my witnessing. Then, both creatures turned simultaneously and raced back toward the eastern woods, the dinosaur no longer pursuing, but running alongside its impossible companion. Their stride matched, despite vastly different anatomies, covering ground with supernatural speed. At the forest edge, that shimmer in reality widened momentarily. For one breathtaking instant, I glimpsed through the distortion, and I did not see our local familiar woods, but I saw somewhere else entirely. A landscape of unfamiliar vegetation, bathed in light from a sky too violet to be our own. Then the two creatures passed through, the distortion sealed behind them, like water closing over a stone, and I was alone in an ordinary park, under ordinary moonlight. I sat there until dawn, unable to move, watching the forest edge for any sign of return. As first light broke, I finally gathered my things and walked home on unsteady legs, my worldview irreparably altered. Mrs. A was watering her early morning garden when I passed her house. She took one look at my face, and she nodded. "You saw them, didn't you?" she asked. But it wasn't really a question. Mrs. A, or Eleanor as she insists I call her now, has become an unexpected anchor in this new reality. We sit on her porch most evenings, drinking tea steeped from herbs in her wild garden, talking in hushed tones about the thin places where worlds brush against each other. My Harold saw them first, she told me one evening, fingers tracing the worn wedding band she still wears 30 years after his passing. 1967. He was walking home from the late shift, and he thought he was losing his mind. Back then, the park was just a clearing where kids played baseball in the summer. "They're coming through more frequently now," she said last week, her voice carrying the weight of quiet warning. "Something's changing on their side." My life continues its outward normalcy. I meet deadlines. I shop for groceries. I call my sister on Sundays. But everything else has shifted slightly, like furniture rearranged in a familiar room. I find myself studying strangers' faces, wondering how many others carry secret knowledge of the thin places and the creatures that shouldn't exist.
Also looks cute on girls. The hat says Dogman, I'm happy to meet you, but there's no guarantee that Dogman won't eat you. Team Dogman hat, it's the prescription. The link to get your own is in the description.
Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after, I think, 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.